Okay, we'll welcome you tonight. We'll call this meeting to order, and would just like to remind you to please silence your cell phones. And also, if you would, once again, just kind of glance at the back of your agenda and see the rules for the council, what the rules are, please. I'd appreciate that. And we will start with our invocation and pledge allegiance, and it'll be given by Council Member Blake Severin.
Heavenly Father, we come before Thee tonight and collectively give our thanks unto Thee for the abundance that we enjoy, for the blessings that have come into each and every one of our lives. Grateful to live in such an incredible community. As we meet this night, we want to do what's right and what's best for the city and the citizens. We pray that a spirit of camaraderie and a willingness to share and to try to see other insights will be able to be a part of our meeting. Pray for our families in our absence that they might be safe. And again, give thanks and pray for this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
If you please stand with me and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Excuse the mayor, he's out of town tonight, so you're stuck with me. I told him he was grounded after this. He couldn't leave town anymore. So we'll go to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to consider the minutes of the June 5th meeting, 2018?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion passes.
You can vote on it.
Oh, a vote. That's right. Okay. We'll start with Council Member Barker.
Yes.
Council Member Severin.
Yes.
Council Member
Turner, yes.
That's right. Okay.
And you would vote as well.
And Councilwoman Stoker, yes. This could be a long night. Okay. Active agenda. We'll go in. We'll do the swearing in of the youth council, the new youth council. And Tiffany, if you're here, will you please come up and introduce?
Okay, so I'm Tiffany Turner. I am a volunteer for North Ogden City. I head up the youth council. And we've got a great group here with us tonight, but we are especially excited because we have our new representatives for the 2018-2019 year. If you guys want to come up when I call your name, we have as our mayor, Richie Armendariz. Our mayor pro tempore is Hope Elmer. Our recorder is Kate Hepler. And as a representative, we have Kylie Coleman. So we're going to have them sworn in tonight. This is a big deal, and we're really excited for them.
Let me take a picture with you with them.
Okay, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States, of this state, the Constitution of this state, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Okay, thank you. Wanted to shake your hand?
Yes,
Heck yeah.
please.
Thank you. And we have our other youth here because we have our meeting tonight. So upon signing off our forms, we're going to just go ahead and meet downstairs. So if you guys want to head down, you're welcome to.
Okay.
Hey, Cheryl, I just make a comment at Youth City Council. They do a lot for the city that isn't recognized, and every month they have a service project that they do in the city, and they're some of the cream of the crop kids They really are. They do a great job for the city. There's about 20 to 25, I think, total. They're in there, and we could take more. So ninth grade to seniors, we'd love to have more on there. They're a great group of kids, and they have a lot of fun.
They are. They do a lot of work. You're right. Thanks. Okay, we'll move on to item number 3, discussion or action to consider the final acceptance of Woodfield Farm Subdivision Phase 1, and the presenter will be our Public Works Inspector, Justin Sinsel.
Council, real quick, you'll probably notice these 3 items are before public comments. That was done because usually these are pretty quick, and Justin has other things that he needs to get done. So we wanted to make sure that he could get to both things tonight.
Thank you. First off is the Woodfield Farms Phase 1 subdivision. It was a little over a year ago I brought this in front of this council for a conditional acceptance. Over the year we've had no major issues, no major leaks or breaks on any of the infrastructure. The sidewalk's all in, curb gutter is all good. All the infrastructure's in and ready to go, and they're ready to get there released and handed over to the city. This one's down on 1700 right off of 550 East. The Rainy Homes development.
Council, any questions or discussion?
No, I move that we accept the final acceptance of Woodfield Farms Subdivision Phase 1.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Councilmember Blake Severine, and Councilmember Turner made this motion. So we'll start the voting with Councilmember Severine,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
myself, Cheryl Stoker, yes, and Councilmember
Yes.
Barker. Okay, passes. Okay. And then this is the acceptance, or consider conditional acceptance of Stone Creek Subdivision Phase 1. Again by Justin.
This subdivision is up at the top of the city. It's actually, they broke it down into 2 phases, but we were able to coordinate enough that they got both phases done at once. It's up at the top of 600 East, 570, right, 600 East and about 3800 North. They're right now wanting to get into their 1-year conditional period. That just means that they've got the 1 year that if anything goes wrong over this next year, it's still on the contractor. It's not owned or taking responsibility of the city, other than we will snow plow it. But other than that, it's still under the developer and has some escrow money attached to it, but we're to a point where they're ready to get that warranty period going.
So John, can we make a motion to where we do Phase 1 and 2 in one motion? Or does it have to be 2 separate?
I think on this one where it's the same developer, you could do them both at the same time if you wanted to.
I'll be happy to.
You go for it, brother.
Okay. I move that we accept the conditional acceptance of Stonecrest Subdivision Phase 1 and Stonecrest Subdivision Phase 2.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do I need to say their names? Oh, fine. We have a motion by Councilmember Turner and a second by Councilmember
It was
Severine.
the other way around. He made the motion.
That's true, he did.
That's
See?
okay, though.
I have no
Oh,
brains
sorry.
up here.
I thought you meant when you were asking for their votes.
Oh.
You don't need to
I don't need to
repeat
say
their.
who did them?
Yeah.
Okay, fine, good. Okay. Start the voting with Councilmember Severine,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
myself, Cheryl Stoker, yes, and Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Motion's pass.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Justin.
you. Okay, we will open for public comments. Thank you.
Mark Daniels, 263 East Alberta Drive, North Ogden. As you know, we just finished our very successful run of Once on This Island. As the director, I would like to take a few minutes and report on the production. During the course of the last six performances, we were able to sell 2,890 tickets, averaging 481 tickets per night and basically selling out 4 of the 6 performances. We kept ticket sales to 4 tickets sold per parking stall, and almost every night there was a few parking spots unoccupied within the parking lot. Once the city put up the traffic cones on the second night of the show, which said no event parking on the resident side of the street, to the best of my knowledge, parking stayed in the parking lot and on the park side of the street. The cast and crew parked at Wadman Park and walked down to the show every night. Upon being asked to direct a community production at the amphitheater, I chose the show Once on This Island for its ability to have a large cast that would include all ages and run only 95 minutes. I put together a budget for props and costumes and scenery, audio and video equipment and lights, publicity and other theatrical related costs. The budget I asked for was $19,997. $5,000 of that budget was to come from a ramp grant that we applied for, and $14,997 was approved by the City Council with the understanding that we would pay the money back from sponsorships, sales, and ticket sales. Ad sales and ticket sales. I am pleased to announce that through our fundraising efforts, sponsorships, and ticket sales, we were able to pay that back to the city plus clear a profit of over $10,000. There were over 160 members of the community that gave their time as actors, technicians, ushers, seamstresses, painters, builders, concession workers, stagehands, and ticket takers to help make this happen. They all came together for the common goal of producing a community production, and I feel it was extremely successful and is hopefully the start of a wonderful tradition in our community to produce quality and entertaining theater that is open and available to everyone. I believe strongly that it's time to have a summer program for the youth and everyone interested in the arts in our community to be sponsored by the city. Like the football, soccer, and other sports teams, I hope that the amphitheater at Barker Park can be a home for the future productions and summer theater and music camps aimed at those who choose to pursue the arts. From the time we started rehearsing, we had a total of 36 rehearsals, 12 weeks. 12 rehearsals took place at the stage of the amphitheater itself, and only 6 of those rehearsals were done with the rented sound system. Once the sound system was in place, we measured decibel levels at every rehearsal as asked, and we were well below the city ordinance. The city purchased a decibel meter, which we used to record the sound at performances. During the first 3 performances, we averaged 72.7 dBc at the tech booth, which is 66 feet away from the stage. For the 4th and 5th performance, we measured the sound at the top of the hill, southeast, 177 feet away from the stage. We measured both dBc and dBA. dBc averaged 65.4, and dBA averaged 68.4. All of these measurements are on record. During the rehearsal process, as we rehearsed on the stage at the amphitheater, I encouraged the cast and crew to be mindful of and courteous to the neighbors by exiting the grounds quickly after each rehearsal, by obeying traffic rules and in and out of the parking lot. I encouraged them to respect the views and different opinions surrounding the amphitheater. I told them it was our job to put on the best show possible and to work hard to make that happen so that they and the community would be proud of our work. What I did not do with the cast, and I quote from last week's meeting, was sit them down and tell them not to worry about what the citizens say around us in the community because it's legal and it's okay. And my only purpose for saying anything to the cast was to help my cast understand that we, the cast of Once on This Island, at the amphitheater, want to be good citizens of North Ogden and mindful and respectful neighbors. We put on a good show in a beautiful venue with 160 amazing people from our community, full families, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, 4-year-olds to, well, much older. They all got to come together for 12 weeks and work as one big community family toward an exciting opening night through a memorable encore performance with friendships built and memories made that will last a lifetime. I saw some amazing things happen with my cast during those 12 weeks, and I heard some wonderful audience reactions to the productions. Thank you for asking me to direct. As the production was winding down, I was able to find a few minutes to focus on a few other things besides the show itself. I had a chance to read through the agreement for the Barker Park Amphitheater that is next on the agenda to be discussed. Having had the experience of working on a show there now, I would like to say that there are many fitting points within that agreement, and the agreement would be completely appropriate for this year and possibly even next. But when all 3 phases of the amphitheater are completed, I find a few of the points within the agreement to be a bit restrictive. I would ask that you revisit a few of those points before you enter into a permanent and binding agreement. 5 years or maybe 10 years down the road, you may find that the agreement now is tying the hands of those trying to run a successful season. Since I have taken more time than my allotted time right now, I have written down some of those thoughts, which are simply my opinions on a few of those points, and I made a copy for each of you. May I give it to you? Oh, sorry. There's two right there. In conclusion, I would like to say that when Mayor Taylor approached me and asked me for my input for a new amphitheater that was to be built in North Ogden at Barker Park, I was excited about the idea of what it could mean for the arts and arts education in our community, and I still am. I gave my opinions and suggestions, and as did many others. Some were used and some weren't, but I gave them because that is what was asked of me as a volunteer in our community. I love North Ogden. I was born and raised here. I grew up about 3 blocks east of where I stand now. My parents lived in that home almost their entire married life. I come from a long, strong line of North Ogden families, the Barretts on one side and the Warrens on the other, both of which have streets named after them. I say that only to show that I am as invested in this community's growth and success as anyone. I love North Ogden, and I truly, truly hope that my team and I made the city and its residents proud with our production of Once on This Island. We feel as it was a success on many levels and a beautiful show. The other directors and I are proud of everyone involved and of their hard work that went into its success. If I may, the cast would like to present you as a city council with a cast photo of our show.
Be awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You wanted to see it, I guess?
I don't know where we head it down that way. Right.
Hi, I'm Scott Henrichs. It's spelled Hinrichs.
And I'm Cami Henricks.
Spelled Cami. We live at 770 East, 2450 North. And both of us are lifelong residents of North Ogden. My wife Judy and I have raised our kids here in North Ogden for nearly 30 years. And Cami and I have been cast members of the play Once on This Island, which was sponsored by the city. And we just wish to thank you for sponsoring and supporting the play Once on This Island, which concluded its successful run last night. Last spring, as Cami was preparing to audition for the play, my wife Judy noted that I'd spent a lot of years doing things with our 4 sons, a lot of activities, but not so much doing activities with Cami, and she suggested that it would be good for me to do something with Cami that Cami would find meaningful. And that's how I ended up auditioning for Once on This Island and being the much older that Mark mentioned in his comments. This production has been very family friendly. As Mark mentioned, we had a number of couples involved with their children. We had a number of other parents involved with 1 or more children, a lot of siblings involved. This is a very family-friendly thing. During the past 12 weeks, I've been amazed by the talent available in our community and the willingness of many busy and talented people to volunteer and to support our community. Cami and I have renewed friendships, we've made new friendships, and we put in a lot of hours of hard work. But it's all been worth it, and I hope you're as pleased with the production as we are. It's been marvelous to work with the play's director, Mark Daniels, who was one of my Boy Scouts back in the day. North Ogden City is extremely blessed to have someone lead this effort with Mark's caliber of talent, expertise, leadership, and devotion. The success of this production is largely due to Mark. Music director Melissa Shertuti and dance director John Thomas are also top directors in their fields and have been amazing to work with. Performing on the new stage at Barker Park Amphitheater has been fantastic, even if it involved rehearsing in an active construction zone. Now, I live near Barker Park and frequently walk my dog there. And while I feel that the amphitheater greatly improves the quality of life in our city, I empathize with some of my friends and neighbors who feel that the new facility negatively impacts them. I appreciate parties working together to develop common sense approaches to mitigating these issues. Now, while I look forward to the completion of future phases of the amphitheater project, I'm concerned that there seems to be no solid plan in place for running and maintaining the facility following construction phases. I'm concerned that the amphitheater will be cared for in a manner similar to the 2 vandalized park benches just south of the amphitheater that have remained unrepaired for over a year. I invite city officials to take steps to make sure that the amphitheater remains the jewel of our city for decades to come. I'm also concerned about some of the stipulations in the proposed agreement with the Barker Family Trust that have been mentioned by Mark. If we want to put on productions of this nature, they have to be financially feasible. And with a little bit of tweaking, I think that agreement can be made to make that work. Now, while I have personal concerns about government exceeding its proper role, I note that even our national constitution encourages public support for the arts. At the end of the play Once on This Island, we performed a number called Why We Tell the Story. And I believe that some of the final lines in the song help explain why public support of the arts is important. So I hope that you will tell this tale tomorrow. It will help your heart remember and relive. It will help you feel the anger and the sorrow and forgive. For out of what we live and we believe, our lives become the stories that we weave. Thank you for supporting the arts in our community, helping to tell those important stories, and thank you for your service to our community. We wish each of you the best in your civic and personal responsibilities.
Scott, could you and Cammie sing that last line?
We can if you want to. We might get Greg up here to help us. We will, if you like. So I hope that you will tell this tale tomorrow. It will help your heart remember and relive. It will help you feel the anger and the sorrow and forgive. For out of what we live and we believe, our lives become the stories that we weave. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Greg Young. I live at 1755 North, 350 West, North Ogden. And just wanted to reiterate a lot of what's been said about the amphitheater. And I want to just let the council know how much I appreciate all of you. And thank you for all that you've done to bring about a Barker Park Amphitheater and for the supporting the arts within the community. These past 3 months, with a lot of hard work and dedication, my family and I, along with the rest of the cast, have worked extremely hard to be able to spend time together acting, singing, and dancing in the Once on This Island production directed by our wonderful and dedicated directors, Mark Daniels and Melissa Chartrudi and John Thomas. I mean, they're doing this with no money in it for them, or it was just the love and the dedication that they have for us as a community. And this production has brought my family and I closer together as we have participated in a family-friendly creative environment. When I first went with my family to try out for this play, I wasn't planning on trying out for the play. I brought my wife and my kids who were all just gung-ho, and I got there and I listened to them sing, and Mark over here said, well, Dad, you're not completing the family here. Why don't you get up and sing us a song? I said, I don't know if I've got the time for this, but picked a song and did it, and let me tell you, it's been one of the biggest blessings of my life to be able to spend that quality time with my family, with five out of the 7 of my kids and my wife. I've seen other families grow closer together as they have participated and have seen kids that aren't usually accepted by the mainstream crowd get involved and find a family of loving cast members who accept them as they are. I've seen a community come together to support a positive musical that teaches love, acceptance, harmony, and forgiveness which is what is needed so desperately in our world today. I want to let you know that our directors have been very positive, even under the umbrella of controversy regarding the building of the amphitheater. What is amazing is the course our directors have taught us to be respectful to those that oppose the amphitheater and to follow the city ordinances that were put in place as we practiced and prepared for the production. As a cast, we have followed all parameters, rules, and regulations necessary to bring about positivity to our neighbors and friends who are in opposition. I would like to propose that the city reach out to those within the amphitheater neighborhood who are in opposition and possibly once in a while offer them some free tickets to some of the productions supported by the city, to ask them to come join us in the arts and enjoy the beautiful music and the hard work and dedication of their fellow North Ogden citizens. Hopefully to even involve their families to participate in the performing arts and to see how it changes their lives. Like what was mentioned before, I saw families change. There were about 4 or 5 families that got together, some of them on a whim, to do this production, and just the growth that they received during that time that they spent together. The arts do indeed change lives, not only for those in the cast, but for those that are able to celebrate humanity through music and art. We are investing in our children and our community as we support this amazingly beautiful amphitheater. After one of our performances, I met with one of my friends that I work with, and she said to me, "The impact this theater is having on these young children and adolescents' lives is incredible and apparent. I could see it in their faces as they expressed themselves, sang, danced, and celebrated life." I understand not everyone who lives around the theater are supportive, but if they only knew the impact it is already having on our children, just with this one production, and the young people within the community, they would see lives changing and the confidence, love, and light that they are being blessed with. I want to say that I appreciate the sacrifices to bring about something great for our community, and I hope that those that are sacrificing their personal comforts or their surrounding area will be blessed for it. I hope that hearts can be softened. And I just want to say that I hope that may God bless you for all of your work that you're doing as a city council and your support for North Ogden City. And in conclusion, I just want to read a quick quote. And this quote is from a former U.S. Secretary of Education, and that is Richard Riley. And he says, "I believe arts education in music, theater, and dance, and the visual arts is one of the most creative ways we have to find that gold that is buried just beneath the surface. They are children, have an enthusiasm for life, a spark of creativity, and vivid imaginations that need training that prepares them to become confident young men and women." Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Council, Aaron Christensen, 2428 Barker Parkway. First of all, I compliment Mr. Daniels, Mark, and his cast for what sounds like a successful production. And from what I was able to see each night, he was right about parking. With the exception of the first night, I think I saw one car on the opposite side of the road, and he probably got parked there before they got the cones out. So I agree with parking. And sound levels from what we measured were about accurate from what they reported. And from what participation we saw, they had a great participation. It was still loud, and even with what we measured was within the ordinances, it's still loud. Tonight, you have your agenda, the discussion of agreement with the Barker Family Trust, trustees and beneficiaries regarding the amphitheater in Barker Park. I'm disappointed to see the city working so hard to try and cover decisions by retrofitting an agreement to the construction of this amphitheater. In the process, the city has created a controversy and allowed it to fester between citizens, neighbors, and even family members. There are multiple problems with the agreement as written. However, my greatest concern is to address the following. Point number 3 of this agreement claims that the current amphitheater and stage are in line with the intent of the Barkers. As none of the current administration was present with the original negotiations, with the Barkers or with the homeowners who purchased property there from the city, A written record available through grammar request is our best source of verification for the intent of the park. We've found multiple letters from the city administration and council describing the intent of the Barkers to preserve open space, not to build a large performing arts institutional building. In a letter to the State Division of Natural Resources, City Administrator John Henriksen, the chief negotiator for the city, discussed a grant the city received to aid in purchase of the Barker property. He stated that, quote, a substantial part of the park will stay in much the same condition that it is now. The ravines will definitely stay in a natural state, unquote. If you simply drive by the ravine on Fruitland Drive across the street, it's very obvious that that one statement is not being followed. That ravine is not in a natural state. We are not against the arts. We are not against members of the play. We're not disputing the enjoyment cast members and patrons experience with the arts. We share the same love for the arts. What we are standing against is the manner and location in which this project has taken place. The lack of attention to former agreements has contributed to a lack of trust with leadership. We need to be able to trust our leaders. Tonight's agreement does have positive points. I disagree with other points. It will continue to push the boundaries as new councils come into play, as new leaders decide what they think we need. The reason we have agreements is to protect what was agreed upon. Now those are being rewritten. I appreciate the suggestion of the idea of free tickets. What's not realized is that the amphitheater has changed our lives with a lack of trust. We don't need tickets to come hear the play. We can hear it in our homes. We did not sacrifice this. It was taken from us. And that is our problem with it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Greg Smith, 2813 North, 1050 East. I just thought I'd give my 2 cents. I live on 2813 North, and I was hanging out in my hammock last week, and I was like, what's that noise? And it was the amphitheater. So, you know, it wasn't enough to disrupt me. I couldn't hear it inside, but it is loud, and you can hear it all over the city. On my way over here on 2600, I saw at least a dozen, maybe 2 dozen cyclists biking on the shoulder. I go to the trailheads about every day, go on my bike ride, and there's a dozen plus families up there biking. And the resources that they have are not adequate. So it's cool we have a summer play, and I think that should keep going, but there's other needs in the community that we need to pay attention to. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ann Warner. I live at 1335 East, 2500 North, just up from Oakland Park. My husband and I have been residents of North Ogden for 23 years. We love it here. This is where we have chose to raise our family. I just wanted to express my thoughts about the amphitheater. I have realized that you have received a lot of negative feedback with the amphitheater, and although we have some friends and neighbors who are opposed to it, our family is really grateful for it. We are also grateful for the wonderful and talented volunteers who work so hard to pull off that production of Once Upon This Island, both behind the scenes and those who were actually in the production. We were not involved in it. My husband and I attended Saturday night, and what a wonderful positive thing for a community to hold. I'm also a teacher here in the community. I teach at Green Acres Elementary. And what fun experience it was for me to see so many of my former students, as well as neighborhood kids in my own neighborhood, who were involved in this production. What a wonderful thing for families to be able to come out and see, and also to see how many families were involved, as they have said tonight. We as a community are very lucky to have such gifted people, such as Mark Daniels, Melissa Chertuti, who have volunteered so much of their time. Being a teacher myself, my summers are very carefully planned on how I use my time off. I know they are both teachers, and they have volunteered so much of their time and talents to bring us this wonderful production. Let's see. I would hope that all of us living in North Ogden would be understanding to those of us who enjoy this great facility, realizing that wherever you live, there can be inconveniences that occur from time to time. Oakland Park, time to time, that traffic gets very, very hectic with all the t-ball games and all the football games, all the things that are involved. But you know what? We chose and specifically wanted to live by a park. It's not always been exactly how we thought it would be, but we're grateful for that opportunity and grateful for what it provides for the citizens. Thank you for what you do for our community. Again, thank you on behalf of our city.
Thank you.
My name is Peggy Barker, and I live at 2553 North Fruitland Drive. I was able to go to the play last night. Luckily, they created an extra night because tickets were sold out when I tried to get some earlier. And last night, I spoke with Mark. Yes, the actors were amazing, the songs, the dances, the choreographer, the background, a great deal of work. It was fun to see neighbors, to see family groups up there, and to know, because I'm a teacher and I have been in performances myself as a youth, to know that this will impact them throughout their lives. But I tried to tell Mark there was also, it was in such an amazing place. As I spoke to him and I'm looking around, I felt myself crying, looking at the mountains, at the sky, at the oak trees, and the sheer beauty of the location, and to be able to be at a performance in that kind of beauty. Maybe I am getting old. I sat by the back so I could wander around through most of it and take pictures, which are amazing, and I'd like to put them all on Facebook, but they're on my camera. And I might be old because I would have turned up the sound a little bit. And I kind of wondered if I went right down by the stage, if I would have thought it was loud enough. But back where I was, yeah, I would have given it a little more crank. A few of the voices were kind of hard to hear. Anyway, I'd like to thank all those who participated, for the city for getting this all together. I did make a short trip to the amphitheater today and walked around inside. I am a little troubled that there are no bathrooms or dressing rooms. There are pipes coming out of the floors, which you can't use for anything. So it seemed like it would have been nice if there had been a couple of walls and maybe a toilet and a sink and someplace you could get a drink of water and take care of things while you're there for practices and performances. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Rod Barker, 2524 Barker Parkway. First of all, I want to just mention a couple quick things. First of all, thank you for the parking during the Cherry Days on the recent play. You know, past years we had parking on both sides of the streets, and it was kind of a horrific thing to try and get in and out of our home, and to try and see parking or see traffic flow both ways getting out of out of the productions. So kudos to the city. Thank you for regulating parking to just the park side of Barker Parkway and Deer Meadows. From what I saw, it really did make a difference on when the events were over. Second thing I just want to quick mention, I mentioned this last week as well, but can I just again mention this Nordic Valley project? Can I just encourage you, I understand that the same type of proposal was taken before the Liberty and the Eden city councils and rejected. It's what I'm hearing. Can I just encourage you maybe to contact those two city councils and ask them, what was your opposition? What things were you concerned with? That as you consider and make your decision, maybe see what their opposition was. And again, I just think it's a project of such enormous building and cost. I would just again encourage you that before you make a decision on it, take it to a vote of the city. It can greatly affect and change the makeup of the city of North Ogden. Take it to the citizens and see what they think. Last thing, can I just address this agreement, not really an agreement, but a discussion that we had with the city. Of course, I'm a Barker. I have 4 siblings here as well. I'm not even claiming to speak on their behalf. My mom used to say that I march to my own drum. I have a different personality than my 8 siblings. This is totally, completely me. To those in the play, and Mr. Daniels, I have no opposition to the arts whatsoever. If I did, I might get divorced. Because my wife has been involved in those her entire life. Mr. Daniels, your parents and my parents were close friends their entire lives. They had a dear relationship. My opposition has been for 2 things. One, as I've said before, I do believe the contract with my parents was breached. I know the judge downtown Ogden didn't feel like it was breached. He had no idea who my parents were, and he never met them. He was just wrangling over words and phrases. So I think the contract was breached. Second, my opposition has also been over just finances. I don't know why we would spend that much money for a project that could have been a little bit smaller and probably still been more than adequate to put on a wonderful production and house things. This document that you're about to look at, many of you have already looked at it. Some of you came to my parents' home and we discussed it together. To those who have some opposition with it, can I just explain some of my thinking? Knowing that the stage was almost completed, in my mind, I didn't see why we would ever knock it down. I know some would still have us knock it down and start over. That's not my feeling. And so as a son of my parents, I thought, what can I do to maybe help have a reasonable discussion? Some meeting of minds between the Barker's children and the city, that we might make some concessions and still come close to honoring the wishes of my parents. And at the same time, knowing how some of my neighbors felt, try and bring in their feelings to and protect some of what I knew they wanted to see happen. That was my feelings behind it. Honor the wishes of my parents, try and protect my neighbors, who I'm not affected near by it as much as they are, because I don't live right across the street. But I still heard some of the sound. I thought, what is the price of honoring an agreement? And I just think there's no money in the world that is worth breaking an agreement with someone that you've made a promise to. Anyway, I just thought I'd make that point, and that as you discuss that document before you, I don't know if it's protocol, but of course you have 5 members of the family here tonight that we can continue to talk and answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none.
One more.
Hi, Melanie Barker, 2524 Barker Parkway. I am the wife of Rod, who is the son of Ray and Fern. I am not a born Barker. I am not born and raised in North Ogden, but I have been involved in the arts most of my life. And this is really difficult for me because I feel like I'm on the opposite side. And I love the arts. But we built our home knowing that park would be kept the way it was. There would be ramadas, a playground for the children, not an amphitheater. To have noise come into my home, to shake my chest. They didn't do it for the play, but when you were testing sound for the 4th of July, my chest hurt at the sound. 90 decibels is still extremely loud. The Barker agreement says 95. That's way louder. Way louder. We were told that there would be 3 amplified things a week. This agreement, I believe, is going to allow more than that. The amphitheater was never to have been in Barker Park, ever. I have been in plays with all of my children, and I can tell you their lives have changed because of that. My life is changing because of this amphitheater. The peace I used to have is gone. I trusted the city, and I have lost all that trust now. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more, do I have a motion to close the public comments?
So moved. I didn't know we had to motion that.
Okay, okay. I don't.
Do we motion that typically?
We typically don't.
Okay.
Fine.
Cheryl, you're doing awesome.
You're doing great.
You're doing awesome.
Obviously not.
No, you're doing great.
Okay. We will move on to item number 7. Discussion or action to consider the agreement for the Barker Park Amphitheater. And John Call, our city administrator attorney, will present.
So, council, this is the agreement. I think most of you have probably read it over the weekend, as well as I think it was first given to you in your inboxes a month or so ago. As you know, there's been a couple back and forths between the family and the Barkers with the language in this agreement. You've heard some comments tonight. Obviously, probably not had time to look at those yet. Are there any areas of concerns or things that you want to suggest as changes? I know that the majority of you here on the council weren't at the meeting with the Barker family in the council, as I think it was Councilman Swanson, Councilwoman Stoker, and Mayor Chug were the ones there. So is there any questions or comments? As you also know, it is your meeting, and you can suspend the rules and ask questions of members of the Barker family as well. If, I think one of them mentioned that they'd be willing to interact with you. It's basically up to you. Is there any typos or anything that I've missed that way? I do know there has been some concern raised in emails to me or conversations I've had. One particular thing was there might have needed to be a provision making it clear exactly how many parking stalls we were going to install in the entire park. Right now, the agreement just says there isn't anything south of the hollow, any more parking south of the hollow. But there was a suggestion that we should give a maximum number in the park, so it's clear that the city can't just turn the northern area into a big parking lot and sell more tickets to events. And I don't think that the council wants to do that, but it might be worth adding that provision. The other things that I'll touch on some of the things that were mentioned. This agreement kind of works in parallel with the ordinance that you passed recently about the 3 events a week and the decibel levels, things like that. Whichever one is more restrictive would always control if this agreement's signed, meaning if the ordinance says you can only have 3 events a week, the agreement wouldn't allow you to have more than that. The same would be true if the agreement says there can only be 2 a week, then there wouldn't essentially the council would be bound to, probably at that point, we'd recommend you change the ordinance. The biggest, most important thing about this agreement from what I see is there is some restrictions on the number of events and the size of events. They are all specifically talking about ticketed events, with the idea being that there would be 3 medium-size events, which would be between 400 and 800 people, and 1 large event a month, which would be over 800 but less than 1,200. And then for events under 400 people, that would be unlimited.
Or
but
3 a week.
But then the code would come into effect and say that there'd be 3 amplified events. But there might be some, someone might want to have a family reunion that wouldn't be an amplified event, and so that wouldn't count towards the 3 a week. So there's some things like that are going to come into play. There has been some concern expressed over whether or not this agreement will hamper the ability to put on a play if we can only do, in theory, 4 nights a week of more than 400 people. 4 nights a month, sorry. Then we would have missed out on 2 of the evenings of this most recent performance. That being said, I think what Rod Barker, I would have said Mr. Barker, but it might cause some confusion in the room. I think that was part of the compromise, and what people were talking about was how do we reach a middle ground. So the 3 of you are the newest to this agreement, though you've seen it. It's been in your inbox. I'm not sure where you'd like to go. Do you have any questions? Anything like that?
Just so on for use of amphitheater, just a real quick question. It has item 1. It's talking about parking and stuff, but item 1 says for every available parking stall as outlined, an event may sell for 3 tickets. But then underneath it says culture events and festivals with paid admission may allow 4 individuals per parking stall. So based on, is that how we, like once on this island we allowed 4 per stall? Is that because it would consider a culture event and festival, where the other one would be for like a, I don't know, paid concert that somebody did or something like that? Is that what the difference is between those two?
So this is part of the disagreement between the ordinance and the agreement. The agreement, the way it's written, the city is allowed to count the stalls in the parking in the park as well as on-street parking on the park side. That's the way the agreement is written. So that's why it's 3 per stall, because it calculates it's not more than the concern was raised that during an event, if the whole park was completed, there would still be families going to play pickleball or to eat a picnic that wouldn't be going to the amphitheater. And so the thought was making sure there's some space left for those families to still park in the lots or along the street, who aren't going to an event. And so the suggestion was made to reduce it down to 3, but then the suggestion was, but we count all the available parking, which would include the street side parking.
So when you say all the available parking, when the city builds out the north side, there are going to be parking stalls up there. I don't know how many is for instance, but let's say there's another 100 stalls up there. Does that mean that's another 300 tickets you could, because it's the entire park? Is that what the way this is? That's the way I understood that. Is that the way it is?
Yes, and the ordinance is the same way. If it's off-street parking, then the ordinance would allow 4 tickets per event. The agreement would say 3, and so there again it would be the lesser of the 2. The caveat there again is that the agreement allows you to count the on-street parking. It was a nuance that I didn't anticipate, and I think it might be helpful to clarify. So there's just one standard. So either the ordinance matches the agreement, then we change the ordinance, or I just think it'd make more sense for them both to say the exact same thing, in my opinion, in the long run.
Well, I think so, just because that's why I'm asking questions,
Yeah.
And then one other thing: event limitations. Small events, medium events, large events are based on numbers of people. Does that include just those attending? Or does that, because the cast had 160 people in your cast, is that right, Mark? Is it 160 people? So that 400, I mean, those people have to get there. I know Mark said they parked at Wadman, which, we appreciate, but if you're doing a big event and they may not park there, I mean, so is that 400 number, is that part of the cast also, or?
That's not clarified in the agreement. Under the ordinance, we've just treated it as ticket sales because that's what it says, so many tickets per event. And so I think the agreement should either be written tickets per event or take into account the fact that there might be large casts available.
I think that should be clarified.
Okay.
So. And then the parking, I think the parking ought to be, in my head, a little more consistent, and then maybe even clarify that. I don't know how many stalls are planned for the north side. Do you have any idea?
I believe that the total stalls for the entire park was close to 400, which is where the 1,200 tickets available came into. Peggy, does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So,
Okay, so that's okay.
But we can tie a specific number to that if the council would like, because I think there's been a concern that be specified, that we don't turn that we don't expand the parking lots to try and sell more tickets.
Okay. That's all I got at the moment. I have other questions about it, but I got to think through them.
John, I have a question of the Barker family, the incredible Barker family. We're talking about this agreement. How negotiable is the agreement with what has been recommended now that a play has actually occurred? Those who are involved in this in a professional way have made some very legitimate recommendations. So I'm just kind of curious what kind of negotiations.
So because of like an extra night that was added for the play, and
Right.
I mean, to me, it's negotiable because
I would think that the only one here's my thought is I was not involved in that meeting. Phil and Cheryl were involved in the mayor. The one limitation I think I probably see in that was that we didn't have like a professional perspective, like a director, like Mark and others who were involved in that. So I'm just kind of curious if there's a way that we can take some really very legitimate recommendations and see if we can't blend them into the agreement. If you tell us that the agreement's not negotiable, then our meeting's done.
you received copies of recommendations.
Right.
And we haven't seen those yet.
Okay, okay.
I should say, my own opinion, I would be open to change it for a city event like that play. But say outside individuals coming from out of state, out of area, I wouldn't be as amenable to changing to that. This is a city function designed to bring a city together.
Okay.
So would that, so Rod, just since we've opened it up to be able to suspend it, do we need these guys to be at the mic, or is that going to be okay?
I think we can pick up the sound
Okay.
well enough.
So an event like I had, I'm going to use this example. This is a kind of extreme example, but the Pops concert that Weber State just did. You know, they had the symphony there. That one there wouldn't fall under that, what you're mentioning, the one with Mark, because that wouldn't really be sponsored by the city, right?
Not in my mind, it doesn't.
Like if, let's say, Lake Severing wanted to put up the $1 million to have the symphony come and do fireworks and call it instead of the Lindquist Pops concert, it'd be the Severing Pops concert. That would be something that you would, you'd want to be real restrictive on. Is my understanding correct? And I understand that. I think I just want to make sure that was clarified from my head. So, and then as far as the decibel level,
the 95 decibel levels, that's like speaking Russian to me. I have no idea what that is.
But it seems like when we talk.
95 is, but I don't know what it means when it's attached to decibels.
this is how geeky I am, Rod. Because I work construction, I got a decibel meter on my phone. I do. And let me. Do you have one too? No.
I don't want to know.
It actually, you don't want to know. It'll actually tell me the decibel levels here of certain things. So let me pull it up and then I'll tell you in a second.
So, council, real quick, in the agreement, the way it's written is 95 decibels at the point of origin, which is at the speakers. So that would allow it. That would allow us to have that be the measuring point per this agreement. In theory, if it's, and they're going to understand sound moves in ways that I could never understand. But in theory, if it's 95 at the speakers, it's going to be less by the time you get to the property line. But there's some intensity and things that come in there as well, depending on which scale you're measuring on. So I think Councilman Swanson's been asking for some additional help from some people who know what that is to give a good recommendation on. Maybe there needs to be two measurements, one dBA and one dBc.
Okay, so real quick, Rod, it says that 90 decibels is like a hairdryer or a lawnmower. A belt sander is about 93, a tractor's at 96, a hand drill's at 98, impact wrench is at 103. So that kind of gives you an idea. So now what that means from your house to there, I can't tell you. Somebody mowing their lawn across the street, that would be basically equivalent to 90 dBAs. So that's kind of what this is telling me. So.
I'm not so concerned about what it sounds like at my house as I'm concerned with what it sounds like at the Christensens and the Casey's house.
So
right across the street. I've got trees buffering me between me and the stage.
when we talk about the phrase point of origin, we're not talking about from the microphone. We're talking about once it comes through the speakers. So if a person is standing on the stage and they're singing, the point of origin is where the speaker is coming from across the bowl, right?
It would be where it leaves the speaker, so where the speaker's attached,
Okay.
what it measures there, unless it's one of those yodeling groups that can get louder than 95 decibels.
That would be Carl's presentation. Carl's polka and yodeling.
The idea would be that whichever is the loudest point, that would be where it's measured. So that's been the intent. There again, it might help as we get the sound system actually designed, hopefully with the next round of funding, to have someone provide us a detailed map of how that's going to pan out, assuming that wind's stable or however they calculate that kind of stuff. So
I got going back to parking. Would it make more sense to change this agreement since the city already passed their own ordinance? Is that if we change it to 4 tickets per stall instead of making the planning commission come back to this one?
So technically the planning commission doesn't have to address it. It's just a council.
Well, I'm just saying since we've already passed one, why?
And I think the only, and this is just the concern that was expressed during the discussions, was that there will be people who, when there's pickleball courts.
But I mean, we'll still sell, if there's 100 parking stalls up on that north side, we'll still sell theoretically 400 tickets. This time we had people walking from all around, and we still sold the same amount of tickets, whether they parked in the parking lot or they didn't.
That's
we'll
true.
Still have the same number. It won't matter if they're playing pickleball or coming down to the park.
True. And it's really going to be what, if the council wants to do that, I think it's, and there again, obviously it's a two-party deal. So
I'd like. I respect these people down here. Yeah.
You better.
So I don't know, what if we change that agreement to 4 tickets and not count the street parking? Which this agreement counts as street parking. The city ordinance doesn't count street parking. If you go 4 per vehicle, then you just up it to 1,600 tickets. No.
You're not counting the streets.
Yeah, not counting streets. Not counting streets.
So they can't park on the streets?
Well, no, they still. So
There'll be about 400 parking stalls.
right, but it doesn't count the street parking. This one counts street parking. They can still park on the streets, it's just not.
And you could move the numbers independent, meaning you could still can't limit ticket sales to a specific
Right.
number.
We can still limit
as well as say
medium large.
4 per stall. But it would just be, you'd need to make sure if you wanted more than 1,200 tickets available that you move that number as well. If you were good with the 1,200 number, then what it would allow is once there's 300 stalls in the park, then the city could sell 1,200 tickets for one show a month, the way this is written. So that's the way, there's two limiters on that number.
How many stalls are on the street? I'm just gonna try and do some quick math here.
I want to say that currently on Deer Meadows and Barker Parkway, I believe there were 67 counted
On street?
On street.
Plus the 120
in 126. There's a couple stalls that end up
So
being
we're roughly 200 stalls.
Roughly.
And at 3 tickets a stall, that's 600 tickets. We only sold 500 in park. So it kind of seems like it's more restrictive to not count street parking.
I think in the long run it probably would be.
But again, I don't know. And for the record, I have to hurry because I'm getting summoned to a fire.
Oh.
I've been telling them to hold on, so if you see me looking at my phone, it's...
Hopefully not them hold on, just you.
What's that?
Hopefully not them hold on, just you.
No, it's somebody, it's up in another area of the town, but...
At Blake's house?
It's up by Blake's house. But I want to listen to this part, so I'm holding off.
Well, I would just propose that if we can do this, John, I would propose, there's some really great recommendations that have been given by those who were directors in the park, or directors in the play. I wonder if we couldn't give a copy to the Barkers to maybe review.
It's a public document, so we can make copies tonight, hand them out to anyone who wants them, as well as put them on the website if we wanted to. I'd probably say it's probably better to give them out and let them circulate from there, just because I don't want to make a habit of posting things given to the city, and it just sets a precedence that kind of might overly burden our website.
So I would propose that, now I don't know if tonight was meant to be consider an agreement. So was tonight supposed to be a voted upon decision?
It
could have been.
Discussion or an action.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's no reason the council can't say we want to talk about it some more now that it's a public document and all council members are weighing in.
I would like to table this. I mean, let us look at it. Let the Barkers review some of these suggestions and some of our own, and have them interject some of theirs and get some feedback. And I'd like to have a full council here too before we make a decision. So that's what I would propose to do: table this until we get more information. I don't think it'd happen by the 7th of August, but I don't know if it's dire to happen that quick.
I think the most important thing, and this is just from staff and the kind of history, is that we pick a date that we do it. So maybe we say we're going to do it on August 14th so that everyone has some pressure to get the next round. And even if it gets delayed, let's set a date now to talk about it so it doesn't get just lost in all the other things that come to the council.
I think August 14th would be, just with what we've already talked about, August 7th, we have a pretty full agenda. So if we can move to August 14th, that would be my suggestion.
Okay. Do you need a motion for that, or are we okay just to make that recommendation?
I
need a motion.
I think actually on this one, it wouldn't hurt to have a motion where we're asking for a specific performance from the staff and others.
Okay. Do you want to do it?
You do it. You go, brother.
Well, my motion would be to table the discussion on the agreement for Barker Park Amphitheater until the family has had an opportunity to review the recommendations from professionals in the arts.
Say August 14th?
I was going to.
Okay.
I was still trying to figure out the arts skills.
That works.
That works?
The arts.
To August 14th, 2018.
Second it.
Okay, we have a motion and second. We'll start the vote with myself. Cheryl Stoker, yes. Councilman?
Yes. Barker, yes.
Councilman Severin?
Yes.
Councilman Turner?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes and is tabled till August 14th.
Can I be excused
Yes.
shortly? I imagine I'll be back.
Okay.
John, would you like to take one of these to make some copies for these, if they want them now, or do
Yeah,
you want to just?
I think Tiffany is gonna.
Get in the morning.
She has that look in her eye that she's looking for something to do. So I think, yeah. Just 20, 30, I mean, a bunch. And then we can just set them by the agenda so people can grab them.
Okay, we will move on to item number 8. It's a discussion or action to accept an annexation petition for processing from Paul A. Mackley for property located approximately 1750 north and 775 east, containing 2.94 acres. And the presenter will be John Call.
So, council, this is the agreement or the annexation we talked about last time. If you remember, we were talking about an agreement for the annexation. And just since we lost a council member, so you are aware, if by chance Mayor Chug was here instead of Councilwoman Stoker, we would no longer have a quorum, which means we couldn't do any business.
We could still not.
But because Councilwoman Stoker is a voting member, we still have 3 voting members out of the 5, which constitutes a quorum. What that does mean is that for any official resolution or ordinance, it actually takes all 3 of you to vote in favor of it, because you need a majority of the voting body, not just a majority of the people present. So just so you know, and so that the people out in the audience know. So this is, Dr. Mackley owns this piece of property right here. He'd like to annex it into the city. He has given Annette all of the information that she needs to start the annexation. And so she has a complete packet. This motion is not approving the annexation. This is just accepting the application, meaning that the city is going to give consideration to whether or not to annex the property into the city. Do you have any questions about it? All the title work got figured out this last week, and so the staff is recommending the council accept the annexation application so that then it can go to the planning commission and ultimately come back to you for a public hearing and an up or a down vote on whether you're going to let it come into the city.
I motion that we accept the annexation petition for Paul A. Mackley's property at 1750 North, 775 East, which contains 2.94 acres.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Starting the voting with Councilman Severin.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes, it's up to you, Cheryl.
I vote yes. So then we'll go on to 9. And this is discussion or action to accept an annex petition. Is that the same one? What is the deal?
It's the interlocal agreement with us and Weber
Weber
County,
County, okay.
for the property.
Okay.
So this agreement, council, allows the city to issue a building permit on the property, specifically for Paul Mackley's daughter and son-in-law to start a home construction. Their plan is to put the home in the location where a future lot will be located when it's subdivided, but they want to try and get it dried in before winter. Where this is an existing parcel, they do have the legal right to build at least one, or to build one home on the property. So prior to subdivision, they could only build this one home that they're planning on building. After subdivision, then they'd complete all the road improvements and everything, and they could build more homes, depending on how many lots were allowed on the subdivision. So Weber County has already signed this agreement. It's the same agreement, with the exception of the property address that we've used for other similar individuals, including one of their neighbors. The home right here went through the same process. They were in the county. They wanted to demo the home and rebuild, and they had, during the annexation process, they got all the permits from us because we had this agreement in place. And they are now members of the city. They've annexed in, and yeah. So, any questions on this?
Is there an agreement number?
A13-2018.
A13, 2018. So I move that we approve the interlocal agreement number A13-2018 with Weber County giving North Ogden City the authority to do land use and building inspection services for the property located approximately 1750 North and 7750 East Paul A. Mackley property.
Second. Okay, we'll start the voting with Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Myself, Councilwoman Stoker, yes, and Councilmember Severing.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. We have the public discussion after.
Yeah, so when a public hearing on land use elements, we typically have staff present what's going on, and then the mayor or mayor pro tem would open the public hearing, and then we would motion to close it.
Okay.
Can I ask a question real quick, Cheryl?
Sure.
Item number 10 and 11, and apologize if some people are here just for that. I would like to hear what our fire marshal says about the cul-de-sac. So I'd like to maybe, he said he was going to be coming back. If we could maybe move those down until he comes back and jump to 12, just so we could get his feedback on that. Is that okie dokie?
It's okay with me.
Do we need a motion on that, John, or?
In the past, we have when we've reorganized the agenda.
I second that.
Just say all in favor, aye?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we will hold those and hope our fire marshal will be back, and we'll go down to 13?
12.
Public hearing. So wouldn't it be the same, or what, on that one, John? On
Yes, so Rob, or I think Brandon might be doing this one, would come up and present, and then we would open the public hearing.
Okay. So we'll go to have, is it Brandon, are you doing it? Okay, we'll have him come up and present the ordinance rezoning property located in approximately 2200 North and Washington Boulevard from a residential R2 and a multifamily residential R4 to commercial C2. A lot.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. This is a rezoning item. It's a legislative matter. When the City Council is considering a legislative matter on a land use issue, it has wide discretion in taking legislative action. Examples of legislative actions are general plan, zoning map, and land use text amendments. Legislative actions on land use issues require that the Planning Commission give a recommendation to the City Council. Typically, the criteria for making a decision related to a legislative matter require compatibility with the North Ogden City General Plan and existing codes. The property that's being proposed to be rezoned is at approximately 2200 North and Washington Boulevard. It's 1.7 acres approximately, and is being proposed to be moved from an R2 and R4 zone to a C2 zone. There's a number of guidelines in the general plan that are to be considered when a rezone is requested. The first guideline is that a definite edge should be established between the types of uses to protect the integrity of each use, except where the mixing of uses is recommended in the general plan. Staff's comment on that is that this proposed rezone would change the zoning designation to be more consistent with what is shown in the land use map in the general plan. The land use map also shows the property transitioning to residential further east above Washington Boulevard, and this does not change that zoning further east, leaves it in place. The next guideline, property to the greatest extent possible unless the area is in transition or is in conflict with the general plan. Staff's comment on this is that the current zoning is consistent with the general plan, and the proposed zoning is also consistent with the general plan. I think it's also fair to say that this area is in transition. There's been significant amount of commercial development along this corridor in the last number of months, and there's an additional site plan and subdivision that are partway through approval just to the north of this property that's also going to be a commercial property. The next guideline states that where possible, properties which face each other across a local street should be the same or a similar zone. Collector and arterial roads may be sufficient buffers to warrant different zones. Staff comment on this is that if this property is rezoned to the C2 zone, this property would be in a different zone than the property across the street. However, there is an arterial type street between this property and the property across the street, referring to Washington Boulevard. The next comment is zoning boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments, placing the lot in two separate zones. Illogical boundaries should be redrawn to follow property or established geographical lines. Staff comment on this is that the proposed zone change would not cause the boundaries of the new zone to cross property lines. This rezone would actually correct a zone boundary that currently cuts across individual lots. John, if you could pull up the last page of the report, I'll show that zone boundary cutting across the lots in just a second. The next guideline, this pertains more to residential neighborhoods, and I think that it's fair to say that this is becoming a commercial area. So it may not be quite as applicable, but it states that the staff comment is that the proposed rezone puts commercial in an area, the guideline is avoid isolating neighborhoods, and the staff comment on that is that the proposed rezone puts the commercial in an area that is consistent with what is shown on the land use map in the general plan. This rezone will have no isolating effect on the adjacent neighborhood, particularly given that this property is along the main corridor in the city and the area is recommended to be zoned for multifamily, mixed use, or commercial. The final guideline is to require excellence in design, and staff comment on that is that there is not an active site plan proposal for this property at this time. Design will be considered at the time of site plan review. There's a few questions to be asked under the recommended city council considerations. The planning commission recommendation on this was that the Planning Commission has recommended that this property be rezoned to the commercial C2 zone, and that the City Council can find that the proposed rezone from residential R2 and multifamily residential R4 to this commercial C2 zone is appropriate for this property and rezone the property. Final note is this map that John's pulled up. You'll notice there's a boundary between the green and the purple, but there's some thinner lines that are farther back, and that boundary between the green and the purple, which is R2 and R4, cuts right between two lines. So this is actually helping achieve one of the guidelines for the boundaries of our between zones, and the change from those two zones to C2, staff recommends is consistent with, as well as the Planning Commission, that it's consistent with the other guidelines specified in our both our land use map and the zoning land use there, and the guidelines in the general plan. Are there questions for me that you have?
Council?
Okay.
Discussion, council? Questions? Public hearing. We'll open it to receive comments on the rezoning of this property.
Seeing none, I move we close the public hearing.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, now discussion or questions. John, is it more or less just kind of a housekeeping item too?
No, so this is an official application by the landowner. I'm not sure how long they've owned these properties, but they just are trying to turn them into a C2 zone. Right now they're R4 and R2. So I think the council can anticipate these 4 homes will turn into a commercial business of some sort, or multiple businesses based on what the landowner has planned.
Is there an ordinance number?
2018-15.
-15?
Yes.
Cheryl, I move that we consider the ordinance 2018-15 rezoning property located approximately 2200 North and Washington Boulevard from residential R2 and multifamily residential R4 to commercial C2 as presented.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay. Start the voting with Councilmember Turner.
Yes.
Councilmember Severine.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, move on to item 14, discussion or action to consider a waiver from a standard requirement for a fencing along the boundary of lots within the Northampton Estates subdivision Phase 7, located at approximately 2650 North, 1350 East. And Rob Scott will be our presenter, or Brandon, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is an item that hasn't come up much before. There's our ordinance. There was recently Phase 7 of Northampton Estates that received approval, and our ordinance states on the topic of fencing in provision 12-6-12 that fencing shall be constructed where the subdivision borders upon open reservoirs, drainage channels, non-access streets, and adjoining schools, churches, and park sites, except where the city council determines that the areas shall remain open and unfenced. All such fences shall be maintained and kept in good repair by the owner of the property contiguous to or upon which the fence is erected. So in short, the fence is required in these situations. This specific situation is the drainage channel that's cited in the ordinance. So a fence is required by default unless that requirement is waived or an exemption is granted by the city council. There was Phase 7 of Northampton Estates that recently received approval. This ordinance came up as part of that. And based on this ordinance, a 6-foot tall solid board, chain link, or other non-climbable fence was required between the eastern side property lines of lots 705 and 706 as this property borders the canal. John, could you zoom in on the plat? And then do we have the laser pointer by chance?
Make sure it's powered on.
So there's 2 sections of fence that we're talking about. This is the borders along the canal. This section is not what is being discussed tonight, and it's already been approved by at least staff's not challenging, or the applicant is not requesting that be considered to be waived. I don't believe that's in dispute by either staff or the applicant. However, there is, separate from the canal, which a trail is adjacent to, there's also a separate section of fence that's required based on the ordinance that follows right here. And that's adjacent to the drainage canal. This drainage canal, it's important to note, about 2/3 of the drainage canal is on the lots. And so the requirement for the fence is not at the back of the lots. The back of the lots is actually right here. And the required fence is a few feet in front of that. And so the ordinance allows for the discretion of the city council to determine whether that should stay in place. The applicant's requesting that that requirement or that a waiver or exemption be granted to them. There's a few concerns that staff has. I think it's fair to say that staff's primary concern regarding this fencing and granting an exception would be that it could easily be considered that removing the requirement for fencing along the drainage channel, that drainage channel leads to the canal, and that canal has a large quantity of water. Staff believes that access to the canal is an important safety concern, especially when developing the property, and thus placing permanent residents on the property adjacent to the canal. Access to the drainage channel, which proceeds roughly perpendicular to the canal and intersects with the area around the canal, can be considered access to the canal. Not requiring a fence along the drainage channel can be considered providing children in this area access to a very full canal, which presents a very real safety hazard. And I do have digital versions of the photos that I'll be working through. And finally, the drainage channel itself has very steep banks, so it's not just the issue of the canal. That's a primary concern, but there's also the other issue of the very steep banks and an approximately 15-foot drop at the highest point from the road that's next to the canal to where the drainage channel begins to the bottom of that canal. John, could you pull up the PDF that includes the about 15 photos? It's Exhibit C. Okay, there we go. So this is a shot along the canal. You can see this is the canal right here. This is the trail right next to it. You can see starting in the background, there's a number of, they're basically scrub oak trees, and then to the west is the applicant's property. The applicant's property borders along the road, and if you'll go to the next photo.
Well, they're not disputing the fence along that road, right?
They're not, but I'm showing it because of the context of the canal. Okay. It leads directly to the canal. The flow is very high in the canal. It's both wide and heavy and fast for individuals. So this is the property to the west that the subdivision would be built on. Next, please. Another shot of it. Next. And then this is the canal. You can see there's a drop in it right here. And then if you'll go to the next as well. This is that drop right there. And then if you go to the next one, this is the grate that the water goes into. There is a sign on it that says no swimming. If you'll go to the next again, thank you. There's a couple shots I've tried to show you into the drainage canal. It was very hard to get, drainage channel. This is just to the west of the end of the canal. And there's the only thing between it really is the road and this, that one single lane dirt road. But this shows down into it. I had a hard time effectively showing the depth of this drainage channel with these photos because of the foliage is so thick, but I do have a way to show that to you in just a moment. Next, please. Next, please. And then this is right behind this. You can see this scrub oak tree this is just looking out to the south of the drainage channel. The drainage channel continues along this way. So it's just at the border. This is kind of the corner between the canal and the drainage channel. Let's see, next photo. Next. And this is the intersection. This is the end of the canal, and this is the beginning of the drainage channel. They almost meet. They've only got the road between them. So if you imagine you're walking along up here, if you don't have a fence between the canal and the drainage channel, you can see how it would be relatively easy for a young child or something like that to get access to the canal by means of the drainage channel or a path along the side of it. Next photo. I think that's all the photos that I need to show you from this packet. If you could go, though, John, to the previous version of the plat that has the topography. So this is a good way to illustrate and then zoom in on this area right here. This is the area that I just showed you that's the sort of intersection between the drainage channel and the canal. I estimated, just eyeballing it, that it was about a 15-foot drop, and then I was able to come across this afternoon. And if you're familiar, if you're not familiar with construction documents or design or things like that, these are what are called contour lines. They have a 2-foot interval, and what that means is from this line to the next line to the next, there's 2 feet of vertical height difference between each of those lines. So the closer together the lines are, the steeper the drop is. And so you can see most of the development, there's, you know, a very visible gap between them. There's probably 20 feet or so between each of them. But as you see, they get really close together here along the drainage channel. They're not as close together here, a little closer together here, not as close there. If you'll go up right here, if you zoom in on that area, this is the steepest area of the entire drainage channel, and it's 16 feet, and it probably is greater than, it's probably much, like about a 60-degree slope. It's a very steep slope, and it's a 16-foot drop. This drainage channel continues through earlier phases of the subdivision and down into the Canyon Vista subdivision, but it's not nearly as steep of a drop or not nearly as high of a total decline in those areas. There is a point just across the next lowest road to the west where it drops about 10 feet, but after that, it's really only a maybe 2 to 4 foot drop from the back of people's yards to the bottom of the canal, and it's a lot more gentle of a slope. This is probably one of the steepest declines in a drainage channel in the city limits, I would guess. I went out and looked at tried to find a couple of others, including this western sections of this drainage channel, and couldn't really find anything that compared to this. And so staff has that concern that, you know, there's the risk of the drainage channel and this very steep slope there, and then it's very close proximity to the drainage, to the canal that has a high flow with a drop in it, and then also a gate that could present very real safety issues. Let's see if I've covered everything. So, you know, I guess this is just a matter of trying to figure out what the right thing to do is from a safety perspective. The ordinance, as I've stated again, is that it requires it unless it's waived. And so, you know, that's at your discretion, obviously, as a city council. What I've tried to do is just lay out the facts as clearly as I can, and then just adding my own professional judgment and experience that this is, I think, a situation that's relatively unique in that, you know, most subdivisions don't have canals that are this big or this full adjacent to them, or drainage channels that are as steep or as deep in their drops. So I think that kind of lays out most of my perspective on the matter. I'll just maybe show one more image and then give you an opportunity for questions. John, if you could pull up the image that shows where that has the plat overlaid on the, that's another shot into the canal, or into the drainage channel, and then zoom in at the back of this lot right here. The applicant was kind enough, his engineer was kind enough to supply this image, which is the approved lots overlaid on the drainage channel. These trees are actually what the drainage channel looks like from above, because it's very dense in foliage. You'll see that this is where the lots end, and this is probably the center of the drainage channel. And then you can see right here is the end of the canal. And so they're very close proximity. Wanted to bring this to your attention, give you as many facts as we could, and lay it out for your consideration. What questions might you have for me?
I got several.
Okay.
Is that a natural drainage? It wasn't a man-made drainage, right?
I'm not sure of that, actually.
That is part of the drainage that comes out of the North Ogden Divide.
Right, so it's natural. It's been there. Okay.
There's had to been some measure of grading on it to get that road through, but overall.
How long has this ordinance been in effect? Do you know?
I don't know, but the short answer, I don't know exactly. I know that the short answer is a long time. It preceded both Rob and I's tenure here.
So then why didn't we require the lots, as far as I know, in Rice Creek to put a fence along there when they have my house back behind my house. They got that drainage right through there, and it's a pretty steep bank there.
There was fencing required in portions of Rice Creek that were part of the approval on that in particular, and I think it was part of the development agreement as well.
Okay, I just wasn't aware of that off the top of my head. And then my house was built in 2002. We didn't have to put a fence up that I'm aware of. We didn't have to put one up. Is it because the bank wasn't so as steep? You weren't here, but that's.
So let me answer the first question. It was adopted in 1987.
Okay.
And I think where you're kind of going in application, it hasn't been uniformly imposed on property across the city.
Okay.
So, in fact, I think the property just north that was subdivided of this drainage channel doesn't have that requirement.
Well, and so then my other point is, he's not waiving the one to put along the east side of his property that's separating the canal from the road, because I walk that area all the time.
Right.
And there's that canal is an open canal. I go there with my kids, and my 6-year-old, every time I think he's going to fall in there. Seriously, but that drainage, I've never been concerned about that drainage. If we require them to put that drainage, that fence wouldn't go all the way down to the end of their property, right? So they basically would lose some footage of their property.
They would lose some of their property, which includes the drainage channel. That's very steep slope at the end.
So Brandon, were you with your pointer? Where is the fence supposed to be at? I'm a little bit confused.
John, could you? Well, I don't know exactly from this image where the lots ends. I do. Sorry, it's right here. But what I don't know is where the drainage channel or there's like an easement here that's a drainage channel easement, and so I believe it's about 10 or 11 feet. Just guessing on what this says right here, and so I believe it's approximately right here, but I can't say exactly for sure, given that image isn't overlaid with that.
So the staff recommendation says, staff recommends that the city council consider the merits for and against the request. So it sounds like you've presented a great point about access to the canal.
Yeah.
What's the merits for granting this waiver?
I think the merits would be property rights. Is it just or fair to require the fence when it hasn't been required in the past?
So we're talking precedents there.
Yeah, precedents, and is this something that the homeowner should decide to put up the fence? Is it something that the developer should decide if he wants to do voluntarily? And again, the precedence issue. I think there's that side of it, and this has caused me as staff. Honestly, I've put a lot of thought into this because property rights are something that I think are very important. But on the other hand, we have government for a reason, and there's, I think, some very legitimate safety issues. And I would very much understand why Council Member Turner, why you wouldn't be as concerned about the drainage canal channel. But on the flip side of things, what I would also say is that it's in and of itself, it's the challenges that come from the drainage channel are hard to pick up on because of the foliage. It's a lot steeper of a drop than you realize when you can't see very well into it, and it's dramatically deeper than the other sections of the drainage channel. And I'm not trying to argue for that. I'm just trying to provide a counterweight. I have a hard time providing a recommendation because I do see the president as far as what to do one way or the other, because I do see both sides of the issue. But I think the core issue for me at the end of the day is that there's a safety issue here, I believe, a real safety issue. And so I think that there's got to be provided a solution one way or another, whether that's something the developer wants to decide on his own voluntarily, or if the city feels comfortable that it's within their comfort level to require this fence along the drainage channel.
But we don't have an ordinance that says, for example, a fence should exist if there is a steepness or something like that?
It doesn't get into slope, but on the general level, it does say that they're required unless they're waived, essentially. And so it doesn't say what the criteria for whether something should be waived or not. It leaves that to the discretion of the council.
So my feeling is I'm okay waiving it, because I think property rights, because there is a possibility if the guy buys the lot or even the developer, if they had it engineered and was approved to the city to pipe that, then they could fill that in and have their property be that way. So that gives them, but if we require them to put a fence, then it's another expense. So
You're saying to change the grading in the drainage channel? I believe there are restrictions on what can happen in the drainage channel, independent of the fence. And I'm kind of putting Lauren on the spot, but my recollection is this came up a year and a half ago when Matt Harvickson was acting as our, not just our consultant engineer, but more at a full-time capacity. Do you, by chance, know what the restrictions are on this?
I know that that subdivision will be recorded with a drainage easement, especially for this drainage area, different than sort of lot drainage that occurs. They won't be able to build on it as is, but it is one of the natural streams. It's seasonal, so doesn't have water in it all the time.
But when it does, it is running fast and high and hard. I find it a little ironic you're willing to consider a waiver on this, and when that canal is so open, and you're going to we're considering a pond and a retention basin, and kids are going to drown because there's no lifeguard, but you're going to build a whole subdivision and children and not require a fence. I find that a little ironic.
Are you saying that to the staff, or are you saying that to the developer?
I guess to you and to us. I find that really ironic.
I'm just curious about what kind of precedent there is. I mean, if we say, no, we're not going to grant a waiver, then does the contractor come back and say, well, you didn't do it and do we have any merit?
Yeah, we should have consistency.
This is true. We did that with sidewalks.
So that's what is the staff's recommendation? Is this a liability issue where you're saying, we need to do something to protect the city because of the proximity to the canal? So,
John?
I don't think there's any liability the city will be exposed to here. It's especially where it's a naturally occurring
canal.
Well, I think the developer is my understanding. He is here, is willing to put the chain link between the houses and the canal, and my guess would be even tie the chain link across the channel. So if a kid is in the drainage channel, they can't climb up to the canal. The question is that the drainage channel fence, whether or not that gets put in by the developer, or there's always, the chance that a future property owner will put it in because they have small kids and say, well, we don't want it. So it's a question of, does the developer have to do as part of their development? And that's where the issues of, have we made anybody else do it in the past? Yes, no, that sort of a thing. So that's kind of what you're all weighing, or obviously weighing back and forth. I think, like I mentioned, the piece just north of this current picture was subdivided in the north side of the drainage channel. We didn't require a fence because this ordinance hasn't been universally applied. One of the nice things about getting new employees is we get our ordinances re-looked at, and so this is on the books. And as Brandon said, it does say this type of fencing shall be constructed where the subdivision borders open reservoirs, drainage channels, non-access streets, adjoining schools, churches, park sites, except when the council says they could be an exception. So I think that's the positives and the negatives are what you're talking about. And property rights is always the thing that all ordinances get kind of weighed against. So, and I think Brandon's done a good job of presenting to you the facts. There's not a clear answer, and I think it's that either side of the argument could say, I really strongly feel this way, and here's why. Which is why you're the policymakers, and you get to weigh what you think is most important. So, is that clear as mud?
If I can throw in 2 comments, I can't remember specifically what you asked Councilmember Severing, but responding to a comment you made a few seconds ago, the one thing that stood out to me as I prepared this exhibit, 1 or 2 things. The first was that there's a difference between canal and trail users who are passing by the canal in a very intentional, endeavor, to walk by it and are there for a brief period of time, and people who are living there and have this 24-hour-a-day risk, where they're not intending to use the canal, where that's where, to me, there's a difference, and it can become a risk in that sense. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, if I'd have a hard time finding, if the council were interested in enforcing this ordinance and not granting the waiver, I guess an argument that you can make for it is that I think you'd have a hard time finding a situation that there's more justification for it than this. Just as I review my memory of subdivisions we've approved and things like that, I don't remember any situations that had quite as, for lack of a better term, extreme of drop-offs and water flow going through them on a regular basis. So.
Get caught up enough.
Mm-hmm. And just here again, so council's clear, that the area of property we're talking about is right here. And so this drainage channel comes all the way up into North Ogden Divide down, and it actually goes through Barker Park. So it's this drainage channel that kind of comes down through here. And then I think when it hits this point, it goes underground in piping.
Are there further questions for me?
And the applicant is here.
Since I came in a few minutes into this, they're asking for a waiver period of a fence, or to delay the fencing until the homeowners build?
For a waiver period for a section of the fence, and John's pulled up this drawing of the plat. This section, to our understanding as staff, is not in question. It's been required as part of the subdivision. The applicant is requesting a waiver for this section. He can correct me if I'm wrong. This section being the border that's not in question, bordering the canal and the trail next to it, and this section bordering the drainage channel, which is perpendicular to it, to the canal. Okay. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer them for me. Okay.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Do I get to say anything?
Yes, we'd love
Yes.
to have you come up.
Thank you.
I'm a developer, and I know I'm tagged with that, but
Please state
actually
your
I'm not
name and
much of a
address.
developer. This is property we've owned for a long
We
time.
need your name and address, please.
Orlifo Pikins, 1025 East, 2100 North.
Thank you.
Why aren't you wearing a Big D hat?
I could get one for you. This property, I actually traded Barker family, Lyman Barker. Ground where down by the church on 2100 North. I traded for this property because I thought it would be a really nice spot for future family lots or something like that. It's probably been 10 years or whatever ago. My son Slade has been talking about building on the lot up next to the canal. he's doing something different, but this is probably his son will or something like that. What makes no sense to me on this property is that on the other side of the gully there is no fence, and there will be no fence unless a homeowner decides to put a fence. So we have a channel with a chain link, which I can't imagine anything worse, or any kind of fence out in front of something that's we all want. I mean, a scrub oak, and this is what makes estate lots. So ironically, I was talking to John today, and I'm standing out in my driveway at my home, and I looked north, and in front of a similar situation, they're over there putting up a 6-foot chain link fence. I would be happy to postpone this consideration and have you all come over to my house and take a look at what a 6-foot chain link fence looks like in front of something that's picturesque. So I get the safety idea, but it seems to me like a homeowner ought to be able to figure out how to handle something like that. You know, this is my business. This is what I do, and you know, this can be landscaped really quite nicely. You can't landscape a chain link fence out. I don't care how hard you try. You can't get rid of them. They're just ugly. And so you can put up a solid fence or something like that, which again, you're putting up, if that's what a homeowner wants to do, you ought to be able to put it kind of where he wants, meander it down through or whatever. But how does this protect a child other than on this homeowner's lot if they can go up the channel right on the other side of the creek, on the other side of the property? So you're not fencing anything off. And if you did fence it off on both sides, then who's going to take care of this mess? Because that's what it'll become. So I really just don't get it. I just think this is a situation that makes no sense. So you can stick a safety tag on. We always do that. I mean, we do it a lot. But sometimes common sense ought to enter into these kind of things. So I'm hoping that, you know, that you'll give it that thought. I'm in no hurry. I'm not standing here saying this has to happen right now. I'm happy to spend whatever time it takes and do what's right. I mean, I actually believe that if we can, and I don't, this is just a thought I had, but prior to all this coming up, I think we could, if we're allowed, and I don't know what this would take, we could put a section of pipe in, you know, so far, because I actually think we need to do it anyway to widen the road area right there, and we need to bring some phone lines and some other things for the rest of the subdivision. That'd be a natural place to come in. But as far as kids getting to that canal, there's so many ways to that canal. If you walk it, you know what I'm talking about. So what we're doing is fencing the owner away from his property. We're not fencing anybody else away from that channel, I think. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm actually surprised Ryan feels as strongly about it as he does, but anyway, that's where I'm at. If you have any questions.
I just have one question. So there's obviously, because there are estate lots, there's obviously going to be CC&Rs on the...
I'm sorry, no?
Because it sounds like you're making...
Bigger lots, yeah.
Larger lots, estate lots you refer to.
Yeah.
CC&Rs, will they require like a vinyl fencing?
Well, I don't, if I were building my home on that lot, I wouldn't want vinyl fencing, but there's always these regulations that we have to work with, and I honestly don't know what they mean by. I mean, if it were me and I could do what I want, I would go in and pull some of that bank back. I'm talking on the south side, but I'm actually thinking similar on the north side. And I would pull that, you know, that if it's 16 foot, I'd pull it back to some degree. You got to be careful because you can't get down in that channel. In fact, let me tell you, you know, somebody came to the Planning Commission meeting the other night and was concerned because Scott, I believe their name is Scott, that we build a home for some people down below my son's house, Slade. Do you guys have any idea where that's at? Okay, that home, the channel, somebody cut into that channel and moved it. And they were living in that house, and that house had no water in it. All of a sudden, that basement was full of water. And we spent the next several years working with those homeowners. And I mean, if you wanted to hear a long, sad story, I'd be happy to stand here all night and tell it to you. But it was a horrible situation. And it's just because the base of that creek was tampered with. So you can't go in and taper or mess with that, I understand, but I think you can pull the bank back, can't you, if that's what you choose to do?
The upper portion may be able to.
So, you know, it's either a landscape feature or it's, you know, now some people look at that and call it a nightmare. And they want to put up a fence and to hell with it. I guess that's ought to be their right. I mean, that's ought to be a homeowner's right. But that's just my opinion. So I get it. I'm going to try and figure out how to work around what you do, but I don't get the lifeguard thing. I'm sorry, but anyway. Okay?
It was a previous discussion. The point. Fran, did you have a comment that you'd like to make, please, to his?
I just wanted to clarify one thing, which is that the ordinance does not specifically limit the fence type to a chain link. It specifies that as one option, but the main criteria is that, and I don't know how you define this, but it's just what I'm just sharing what's in the ordinance, is that it states that it be non-climbable and not less than 6 feet in height. So, you know, something that is not able to easily be climbed or intended to be climbed. It gives the solid board, chain link, or other non-climbable fence not less than 6 feet in height is what it states. So it does provide room for options.
Thank you. Council?
So my comments still pretty much the same. I still feel like we should consider the waiver and not require it. So that's my thought. I'd like to hear others. So. But I still feel the same. I walk by there, I think it's the homeowner that would be responsible for it. I understand the safety concerns and stuff, but there's some cool landscaping you could do, and there's not a fence on the other side, so.
And we're only
I walk it all the time.
Yeah, we're only going to fence that short distance.
I agree with Cheryl. I think the canal needs some. It'd be nice to have fencing on both sides of that canal, because that's crazy. But they are going to put the fence to separate the homes from the canal. So,
yep.
But that is part of the Cherryway Loop Trail too. So.
Well, I grew up by McGriff Park. Had the canal in my backyard all my life. And
how many times you drowned? Like 4 or 5?
Twice. I think I agree with Councilman Turner. It's probably more of a, you know, the owner occupied responsibility.
Well, then I'm going to make a motion. We'll see where it goes from there.
Did you guys have thoughts?
No, I think I agree with you guys. I agree with Mr. O'Pikins. I'd like to have an open. I like that look, but I grew up with it too.
We just knew we knew the safety.
Right.
I look back and I don't know how my mom led us, but there used to be right there by McGriff Park, there was like a footbridge. And we used to go across that every day back and forth to Bates and back, and I look back, wow, that was pretty brave of my mom, but I think it's an owner occupied concern myself.
Cheryl, do you want to chime in, or do you want me to make a motion?
I don't know. I grew up behind Ogden River, and so we always knew stay away from it when it was high runoff, and we played in it when it wasn't. But I never played in the canal. We were always told to stay away from that canal. And I know where that drainage ditch is, and it is seasonal. But when that water's in there, it's running high and fast, and there's a lot of junk in that thing too. I think people have thrown things down in there that you can't really see. So
if you went and looked at that, Cheryl, on the north side, we've cleaned
Have you seen? I haven't. I liked your idea of looking at it and seeing from a different perspective than just walking by it and looking down.
We haven't cleaned this side out, but of course we will.
And you are going to, there will be a fence on the
Yeah.
canal side. It's just the drainage ditch.
I totally agree with, I wish there was a good fence on both sides of that road
Yeah.
myself.
I wish Pineview would have piped it.
Well, I'm going to make a motion that we consider a waiver for the requirement of the fence along the boundary of the lots on Northampton Estate Subdivision Phase 7, located approximately 2650 north, 1350 east.
So, quick question: are you approving the waiver?
Yes.
Okay. Because considering the waiver.
Considering to approve it. Yes, we're approving it.
Okay.
Approving the waiver.
Just
Sorry.
making sure. Thank you.
I second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Start the voting with Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Myself. Yes. Okay. Then we
If
will.
I could just make one comment about this. The planning commission, if you read their minutes, they think that it would be wise for us to take a look at that specific ordinance. It may need some tweaking.
I agree.
I think so.
I think it needs to go on a work session.
And Orla, if I can get you big D hats too. So. I'm sure Jaden can get me some. Or no. Huh?
Okay, so we will go back to item 11 now that Councilman Barker is back on the discussion or action to consider.
It's actually 10 first. We have public hearing
We
first.
have the discussion first, then the public, so they have
Okay,
the rights.
Right. So.
Excuse me. So we'll go back to that. The ordinance to revise the cul-de-sac length standards. And Rob, will you be presenting?
I will.
Okay.
Mayor, members of the council, audience, this public hearing is, as previously shared with you by Brandon, is a legislative matter. So we're considering a amendment to the subdivision ordinance of the city. And as such, this one has been around for a little while. Back in March, the initial request for consideration was made. You requested the Planning Commission make a recommendation. They made a recommendation to retain the existing ordinance. The recommendation came forward. The question was asked, did the Planning Commission consider whether or not a special exception would be appropriate? The Planning Commission had not, and so you requested them to take a look at crafting language that would allow for extending cul-de-sac lengths based on a special exception. So staff worked with the Planning Commission and with the requester, and we came up with a draft amendment, and then there was a public hearing that was held on June 27th, 2018. So as part of this, I'd like to just share with you a little bit of a background on the things that are included in this amendment. Let's go directly to the amendment itself. That was one of the suggestions, early suggestions from.
Which exhibit is that?
It should be, I don't know, there's quite a few there. It's like J.
So, let's see, that's more minutes. Oh, here it is, I think. Maybe.
It says amendment at the end of the, sorry, John. Usually put
here it
those.
is, okay.
There we go. So as a part of this, the special exception provisions in the subdivision ordinance call for specific items that need to be reviewed. They don't all have to be met,
but they at least have to be addressed. There's some 4 or 5 of those things. There's also some prohibitions in the ordinance, and one of those prohibitions is not allowing that a cul-de-sac length be extended. So hence the reason for this particular approach is to allow for some specific criteria that would allow for cul-de-sac lengths to be extended. Our current ordinance allows for cul-de-sacs to be a maximum of 600 feet in length, and the request is that it would be allowed to go up to 750 feet. So the approval criteria that was developed with the staff and the Planning Commission included standards for a maximum cul-de-sac length, consideration for connectivity, and also a provision for future streets and the timing of those streets. The surrounding property makes the subdivision an infill project. Maximum acreage that would be a part of that infill, and also a trails provision. At the public hearing, there were a couple of clarifications that were, well, I'm sorry, before I get to that. There was also a discussion as to whether or not the standards and the criteria should all be met. And the Planning Commission is recommending that all of these items have to be met in order to grant a special exception. The process for special exceptions is still the same. The Planning Commission considers the request, the application, they make a recommendation, the City Council makes the final decision. So at the public hearing, there was a couple of changes that were made. The first change is the Planning Commission wanted to have the authority whether or not to require trails. So trails may be required by the Planning Commission after considering a recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Department. So that's included. And also, we have a limitation of 15 dwelling units per cul-de-sac. And the thought was that if the cul-de-sac is lengthened, then there may be a need to allow for a few additional units up to 20. But that would also be at the discretion of the Planning Commission. So those are the two things that were added. So let's take a quick look at what's the criteria that was developed by the Planning Commission. Again, all of the following criteria are met. The maximum A is the amount of, or the length would be 750 feet. Item B, there is no reasonable opportunity for connecting to another street network at this time. So rather than having an ordinance that specifically is so black and white that it can never be met, this provision is geared for the ability for the Planning Commission and the Council to consider what is the overall situation relative to whatever request might be coming forward, and give you some flexibility in considering that. Then along with that, if it's determined that maybe the timing isn't correct, or maybe the timing isn't ripe for providing for connectivity, if that's the case and there's an opportunity to do that, a condition can be made that would identify through a development agreement the condition for specifying improvements of requirements for an improvement, and for example, providing for a fire access road and or right-of-way dedication. So maybe not improvements, but at least those two things. There may be some others. C, property be subdivided as infill surrounded by developed subdivisions. So there isn't a natural extension of opportunity for additional roadway access. Maximum acreage of the subdivision be served as 5 acres. If a special, and E, if a special, this is the trails one, a special exception is granted, connectivity to trails and pedestrian walkways may be required by the Planning Commission after considering a recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Department. So we've run into this a number of different times, and that is that where we have some opportunity to have some pedestrian connectivity, that ought to be considered as part of, in lieu of potentially, of allowing for the cul-de-sac to be extended. You have a question? I've got.
I'm sorry, Rob, back on D.
Please.
Why was the maximum acreage decided at 5 acres? Just curious.
It has to do with typical blocks are about 10 acres. And it seems that if you have an area that has above 5 acres, you're more than likely going to have an opportunity to connect somewhere. So 5 acres seem to be a reasonable number. It gives some flexibility. 5 acres is, in my opinion, somewhat generous.
Thank you.
Sure. And lastly, I mentioned if a special exception is granted, the number of lots on the cul-de-sac may be up to 20 as approved by the Planning Commission. So that doesn't say you can have 20, it's up to 20 from 15. So it might be 16 or 17, something along those lines. Let me just address a couple other things in terms of the relationship to our general plan. Our vision of North Ogden identifies improved current and future streets in terms of appearance, connectivity, and providing additional citywide choices for travel. So an important aspect of making sure that we are able to provide for connectivity in our city. Goal number 1, increase housing quality and variety. That goal, establish and adhere to high quality building and design standards for all housing types so that development enhances the community character. Strategies, proactively evaluate current ordinances and policies to determine whether there are obstacles that can be removed or modified to achieve the community's housing goals. So that's, as you very well are aware, I'm here regularly as we are making changes to our standards. Create design standards to improve the overall quality of North Ogden's housing and work with the affected entities to determine whether or not there are opportunities for change, appropriate change. Some summary of land use considerations. First and foremost, we always take a look at safety. Are safety codes addressed? And secondly, is the request a positive change for not only a specific property, but does it make sense for the entire city? And in my mind, that's one of the critical questions for you to answer tonight. Does this really make sense for the entire city going forward? And lastly, is the proposal consistent with the general plan? The Planning Commission found that the amendment is consistent with the general plan, and they recommended adoption on a 6-0 vote. We had one planning commissioner that was ill that night, so happy to answer questions. Again, if you approve this, that doesn't mean that someone can walk in the door tomorrow and get an extension. They would have to make an application. That application would be submitted to the Planning Commission, and then it would come back to the City Council for final decision. Any questions I can help you with? Thanks, Council.
Thanks, Rob.
Council, discussion, thoughts?
Yeah.
Or open it for public comment, sorry.
You're good. You're doing awesome, Cheryl. I think Cheryl ought to run a meeting all the time.
No.
Jim Flynn, 538 North Main, Brigham City. This might seem amazing. I'm in total agreement. We've come and there's been a lot of vetting, and I appreciate Rob and you and the Planning Commission. This, I think it started, I don't know how many months ago this started, but by working together and vetting all the different issues, I support this. Happy to answer any questions.
We've already had all our questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Council?
Seeing no more comments, and I propose we close the public hearing.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now council discussion.
This one seems pretty clear cut to me, so.
Go for it.
You want me to do this one?
Yeah.
Okay, is there an ordinance number on this one?
Yes, there is.
Joyce?
Do you have any comment? Okay.
Sorry about that.
Nope. You're good.
2018-16.
Okay, I would motion that the ordinance for the ordinance 2018-16 to revise cul-de-sac length standards be reviewed by staff and approved and be approved.
I'll second.
Discussion or questions? John, do we need to put in there like it's special exceptions, not always a?
So it would
Is there
be
in there?
It would be as shown in the language that Rob went through in the ordinance,
Okay, just
which
making
is a
sure.
special exception.
Okay.
So you want me to include that?
No, it's already in
Oh, it's
the
in there.
language.
Okay.
We're good. Okay. Okay, start the voting with Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, we will now open it to public comments again.
Paul Mackley, 730 East, 1750 North. Just want to tell you thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Seeing none, do I have them? Close the public hearing. We'll open it to council and staff comments. John?
I actually do have something for the council tonight that's a little more intense than usual. So hold on to your hats. As many of you know, we own the building that the museum is in. Under our current lease agreement with the museum, they're responsible for all the maintenance on the building, as well as the utility bills. We do some stuff up there. I think we do lawn care. But they are having some issues with the building and have reached out to Parks and Rec for help. We didn't want to commit the city to do a bunch of work that the council wasn't okay with. None of it's really a lot of money. It's more time specifically for Tiffany's staff, and right now she's currently short 2 people, and so it makes it harder for her to be able to fulfill those commitments. There's things like there's might be an animal problem, like a raccoon or something up there that's apparently chewed through some of the power lines to the air conditioning unit. There's a bunch of weeds at the museum. There was a leak in the roof. Their gutters are full. There's a lot of dead limbs. So a lot of it's kind of the type of stuff that if you lived in the house, you would be doing on a regular basis. Our current agreement says they have to do it. I just wanted to understand if the council, if you had strong feelings about we should make them stick to the agreement and just tell them no, or we should help them out. We've done some things in the past. Most recently, their toilet was leaking. And when we went to replace the toilet, we found that it had leaked so much that it actually ruined the subfloor, and we had to rebuild the subfloor of the bathroom. Eventually, the long-term plan for the building is obviously it'll be torn down and the museum will move someplace else, but they don't have the funds to move, and they even struggle to find volunteers. So I just, where it's kind of a policy decision, does the council want to commit city resources to it, or would you rather just tell them they need to find more volunteers, and possibly we could even help them find volunteers. We do a lot of Eagle Scout projects on that building and things. It's just, I just want to understand what the council wants us to do moving forward with that, where they don't have a ton of resources, but it's not necessarily something that I think the city should get too involved in either. So it's kind of a weird. I have mixed feelings, I guess. If you can't tell, I have mixed feelings. So, any strong feelings from council or?
Well, did you say you lease it? The city leases it to them?
Yeah, so we own it. They rent it for ours for like $1 a year or
I was
something.
gonna say it couldn't be that expensive then. Huh?
Yeah, no, and so I think that was part of the agreement was they would keep it up. So.
Do they have a revenue source?
Just donations. So everyone who works at the museum is a volunteer, and they survive off the donations. So there are some, That being said, I mean the city does fund some. We know we do a couple grants to nonprofits every year, so there is a chance to incorporate that into this discussion. But yeah.
My opinion is we help them out.
If it's
it's our building.
It's our building.
And it does serve the community. And yes, they're volunteers, and some of the volunteers wouldn't be able to clean the gutters anyway. And so I just think that I think Eagle Projects is a great idea.
To a degree.
Or even we could even if the U City Council is looking for stuff, or other type of entities maybe the firemen need something to do for a day.
They might.
R&O may need something to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like we should help them out.
Okay. Well, so I mean, it's obviously not an official action. I just wanted to get your feeling, and so we'll coordinate resources, and I think we'll probably try and put something together if you're okay to put it on the city Facebook page. A call for volunteers as well as people with some skills that might be able to help assist at that structure. So,
John, isn't there a website too what's it called?
Just Serve.
Yeah, Just Serve. You could even put it on there.
That would be a good one to get on there.
And you probably have noticed that the museum does regular Facebook posts on stories, and so they're pretty active as well. And so I think it'll be
posted numerous places.
Yeah,
that'll help. Okay. Okay. Nope. Okay. Start with Councilman Parker.
Yeah, I do have a couple things. First, so I understand we made a profit with our play. Is it possible, and maybe I'm heard wrong, we charge the people that volunteered to buy their own shirts? Is that...
I don't.
I had some youth in my area that said they had to pay $10, $20 for their own shirt just to get a shirt. If we made a profit, is it possible to maybe give the money back? If they're volunteering their time, why do we have to charge them to have a? That's just my thought.
So I think that there is a lot of possibility for what to do with the quote unquote profits, right. And I think that can be added into the discussion. The other thing that's been thrown around, and I probably should have mentioned this during my comments, was possibly taking the proceeds that are left over and earmarking them, setting them aside, and saying they have to be used for next year's arts project if we're doing one. So,
okay. I was just thinking. I had a couple that said they had to buy it, and I didn't think it's right that we're making the youth buy their shirts so that they can be in a play that they volunteer for. But another point about the amphitheater, I understand now we're paving the access road in the back. That's what I was told today. Is that correct, John? That's what the contractor told. Well, he told my dad.
I know they're doing a bunch of.
Said he's going to pave it, but there's no fire hydrant put in yet. It seems like it'd be smart if we put the fire hydrant in before we pave it.
They should be putting the fire hydrant in.
He said they weren't, so maybe we need to get with them.
Okay, I will connect with them.
I didn't think they were paving it, just graveling it.
That's what I heard, and then it got changed. Today I was told it was getting paved.
Do you know who your dad talked to?
Yeah, the general on site. I can't remember his name.
Lee?
Yeah, Lee,
okay.
That's right.
Big D, come on.
That come on a change order?
That is Walkman, isn't it? I'll connect with Lee and find out just exactly what he thought he said. Yeah. That's probably the right place to start.
There you go.
And sorry, one last thing. I got this bag of garbage that was picked up on my parents' property last night this morning after the play. My dad goes around and picks it up every week, or every play. I don't know if we need more. I know garbage cans aren't the issue. It's just people are lazy and don't. And then he also wanted to mention on these flyers, we need to proofread them before we pass them out. It says this play is funded in party by a $5,000 grant, so we just need to make our grammar correct. Nothing big, but.
I think one thing we could do is we could buy some, not silt fence, but a fence that we can put up along the border.
Well, and
so it doesn't blow up and over.
My dad's just concerned because if it gets in the alfalfa or the grain or the hay, then he loses money.
Yeah, can't.
'Cause then it's not.
Can't sell that bale.
So I was asked to bring it up.
Okay.
That's what I got.
Well, that brings up other questions. Well, I actually thank you for bringing that up because I had something I'd written down, but then that brought up something else. So, and I apologize because I was out of town. Did we do something for the directors?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I assumed. I thought that part of that trail was all going to be returned to kind of a natural.
There will need to be at least a fire road that gets vehicles to the back of the building.
Well, and it's going to
just to the back of the building.
Well, it's going to connect up to the upper parking lot eventually.
The way it was designed, yeah, but everything that isn't in that was going to be reseeded with natural stuff, but that hasn't happened yet because they're still finishing up a couple things.
Okay, but that's eventually part of at least the initial plans is to put that back into a natural. Because I know that we talked about that with Ken Hill. Ken Hill was really concerned about that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's all.
Councilman Turner?
Nothing.
I have nothing either. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
We are adjourned.